Welcome to NeuroNoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology podcast featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The NeuroNoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.
Good morning, sir.
And John.
How are you?
Recovering from
Suisun.
Suisun City.
Exactly. Oh my God.
Hello.
Hey, Mari, how are you?
I am pretty good. Yourself?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't know.
As Pete in recovery.
Yeah, I don't know.
Brain explosion.
Exactly. It's partly why. That's one of the reasons I was like, do I really want to go? Tara can go. Her head can absorb all of this. Hey, listen, because you're recording, Pete, so I'll give you that, the lead in here because I'm going to ask Mari about porn. So I'm not sure if this is something you want to broadcast or put it on pause, but what did that mean?
Why not?
Well, what did that mean?
No, we did, I think, a really good show. I'm going to do some puns here,
Okay.
Wait a minute. What happened to your beard?
Oh,
Who's this youngster?
This is one of the few times a year I get to feel better about myself.
Who's this tyke? This toddler?
This toddler, exactly.
I
you
got
do
some
look
coffee.
different, Jay. That's for sure. No, I think we did a show that was long overdue, just getting really direct into something that's not only on everybody's minds, but the complete proliferation in terms of the use of pornography. And
okay.
when we were at the summit, I would say in terms of almost everybody that came up to me, and predominantly female, we're very, very thankful for that. So yeah, I don't know whether we want to make more space for that. It's not just no pun intended, a sexy topic. It's something very relevant in our world, in terms of pair bond, the failure thereof. Yeah.
No, I went a different way.
I brought my naked face.
There you go. No, I went a different way. I'm going to circle back to your naked face in a second, Jay, but I went a different way with it, oddly, because I've literally had clients ask me if they could watch porn during neurofeedback. Ostensibly, they're yes, but you get.
Well, I'm going to loop that into, a comment I've made for training with children. When I don't want to get on another one of my horses. Oh, what the heck? I'll get on another one of my high horses. Yeah. No, essentially, if the feedback is too stimulating, you get really, really good in session data, but it doesn't translate to the rest of life. I mean, school is boring. And if you're training the brain to respond to things that are exciting, it doesn't work, in school. So, I mean, I find it rather amusing that a client is asking that, but the fact that the client is asking that, I think we need to address. First of all, that tells you a little something about the client.
Yep.
Yeah.
In fairness, I've had it like 3 times, and they've all been male. So
really?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that means sociologically, but there it is. I'm certainly there. No, I'm with you. We don't have horror film. We don't have our video presentation stuff is pretty mild for that reason. It's just like documentaries and whales, and this isn't supposed to be some exciting adventure. This isn't going to the movies to watch a film. You're not here to watch movies. Yeah. Yes, we're luring you in with watching movies, but that's not the purpose. There's no popcorn, et cetera. So there's reasons around that. So yeah, we try to avoid that really overstimulating stuff. Having said that, of course, I have Alien because everybody should watch Alien. It's just one of the greatest films ever made.
Well, I mean, what you do to help hook a client's brain And I mean that in a positive way, can be that can be part of the training as well. You kind of start with what you've got.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is a message that we need to proliferate in terms of the success of neurotherapy. If your neurotherapy is failing in the real world, but your data looks really good, look at how stimulating.
Yeah. So Jay, your naked face, we should touch on that because it's really important. It's important for viewers to know why Jay has a naked face. It's a fundraiser for students who we need to encourage to be in this industry. I'll let you launch and talk about how anybody who's watching could get involved. By the way,
I have to say that it's not because I missed shaving.
you missed badly if this is the result.
After it had been shaved off with the razor at the evening event, the next morning I did a clean shave just to get everything kind of equal level of stubble. And I had some long hairs down on my neck that they hadn't gotten quite down there with the shaver. So I got myself cleaned up. But what happened is what happens periodically with me. I do stupid, crazy stuff in order to raise money for students. And when I was in grade school, we we all had to read a book, a few books, a list of books in the summer. And if all of us had our parents check off that we had read these books, then the principal would dress in a dress and dance on the school roof. Well, everybody is going to read a few books just to make this crazy act happen. So I took up on that, and I'm not going to get in a dress on a roof. So,
I don't know, Jay.
I'm thinking about it now. That sounds pretty good.
There's always a possibility if there's a way to raise money with it, but it didn't come to me that way. I thought, well,
actually, it should be Pete. I think we should see Pete on a roof in a dress. Now that
I don't think you could do that anymore. But if I could, it would be a moo-moo.
I could do it, but that's pro forma,
It would be, the tent and awning company has you covered.
Wrigley Brothers.
So I was at a California Society meeting many years ago now, and the idea just popped up. Auction off the beard, and I raised a couple $1,000s, a few $100s from one person, or $500 from another, and they raised up $2,000. And I thought, well, for $2,000, have at it. So they shaved me clean. Now, at the time, I should have had an inkling of what might come in the future, because Nick Dogras had left a little Hitler mustache, but my business partner Ali took care of that as the final shaver. So, but $2,000, and one of the UCLA researchers who was a keynote address at the meeting said, I will never ever forget a meeting that somebody got shaved at, because that's just it stands out. This is unique, and I Cynthia Kerson said, I don't ever want to see you with a beard on you again. I think it's awful. And I think, well, what about operant conditioning? Don't you understand? You just paid me to grow a beard to donate. So it's coming back. And over the years, I think the high watermark was at an APB meeting where Nick Dogras wanted at the mustache thing again. I know it. And he put down a couple $1,000, but there were two teams, John LeMay's team and his team, and whether you won or not, all the money that you raised went in. So $7,000 there, $5,000 once in Australia. They sold the beard. I don't count that, but they sold the beard the next year, pasted in a wig head that we used to measure for electrodes. For $500.
DNA, Jay. You better be careful here.
That's right. That's right.
Now I hear that Nikki Wittridge has what was left all packaged up, and there may be an auction of that.
in order to raise more money.
We are
it's a
not
rumor.
a weird group at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. We're into straightforward brain regulation.
Yeah. Anyway, total across the year is $21,265.
That's fantastic
for the beard being auctioned off. So,
and this money just for the audience who doesn't know, Jay, where does this money go?
Well, there are a number of foundations that have received funds. Right now we just gave $4,265, which is what was raised this time, to the QEG certification board, and they'll put it out for researchers or students in some fashion. And the researchers have to be student researchers, not not one of us,
Right.
Although I could go to school,
get some of the money back. It's great, Jay, and I admire you for it. People, I've always said, "No, I'm not shaving this off." I'm giving it some thought. I hear you, because this is such an important element of our industry, that young people be encouraged to go into neuroscience, to go into QEG analysis, or whatever the aspects are.
Yeah.
They're the future. Not that any of us are going to die anytime soon. I plan on living to be 150, but they are the next generation of people who are going to carry this torch forward. And the more we can encourage them to be in it financially, obviously it's an expensive industry to be in, the better. So
it's crucial. But on that note, I can't say many of us noted this. I mean, I kind of laugh. I'm in my, mid 50s, and I'm, I was the younger generation, but I was absolutely overjoyed to see the next generation come up. And sure, they're students, but these were knowledgeable people. Okay, they weren't just on the sidelines. So I just felt like I took a beautiful, I'm not going to say sigh of relief, but it warmed my heart to see the enthusiasm and the active as opposed to just passive intelligence. So that was fabulous to see.
There were Saybrook has a mind-body medicine kind of a branch of their university, and 6 of the students who do that were at our event. The Suisun Summit was, I think, quite a good success. I heard that the live stream that went out was of extremely high quality. The audio was good. The PowerPoints, they would toggle between the PowerPoint and the speaker, sometimes the PowerPoint and the speaker. The cartoon with the three amigos on the bottom. But it was very well done, and I think that those recordings will eventually also be marketed out, because I don't know if you've ever caught Dirk Deridder's talk, but one of the doctors at the meeting said, "This is the 3rd time that I've caught his talk, and I think I'm starting to get it." And
one thing is the speech rate, but the content, just the content.
He builds it so systematically and so absolutely logically, and he starts actually way back with the philosophers in Greece and earlier, and it builds the model in an absolutely solid way. But that's why he's published in Science. I mean, you don't get published in Science by writing something on the back of a napkin and sending it in. His work is always impeccable and extremely well documented and well done. He's never had to retract his study, that's for damn sure. But getting his so you can play it and stop it and back it up and go, let's refocus on that and see how that fits in. But his talk is worth that, and the depth of Martijn's talk, I think, also is worth the recording. And I think $300 and something for 3 full days of recording. They got me for an hour and a half or so. All the keynotes had a full hour and a half, so they're major talks. And I would suggest that people look at the content there as a recording is probably a better way to catch some of the really meaty, dense material the second and third time through. The stratification and logic of how to treat in psychiatry that Martijn has pieced together using biomarkers. He dedicated his talk to me. His first biomarker is the slow alpha we identified in the first study we did together, and that's held through all of his work. But he literally has a kind of a flow, stratified decision tree flowchart on psychiatric medication selection and treatment. So I would suggest his is also one worth it. Now his is going to be published in Nature Clinical Practice or I don't know. There's a bunch of different natures. Anyway, his material is also, I think, well worth the recording.
It's starting to grow, Jay, isn't it? Because the newspapers are well, not your beard, but no, the newspapers are picking up on it. The Woodstock for Neuroscience, Suisun City. I'll put it right here.
The word got out here locally, and the newspaper called and did a brief interview, and they sent somebody over and I stepped outside the front door, turned my head to the side, go boom, they took a shot, and that's on above the fold on the front page of the local newspaper.
In color, by the way.
Yeah,
color.
In color. And I blush when I get photos, so I'm a little red,
And for behind the scenes, we posted today, what you're buying isn't, yes, it's the presentations, yes, it's the keynote speakers, but it's the networking, and you can kind of get an idea of what the networking is like when you see Jay, Mari, Tara from the Balanced Brain, everybody getting together and having a couple beverages and talking neuro. So it's a great time.
I think we have a 3-day meeting that ends up being very free of camps fighting against each other and arguing. There's a lot of discussion, a lively discussion, but there's no animosity. It's a very friendly group, and anybody who misbehaves, we have them walk the plank.
No, I'm going to piggyback that, because I think one of the, an internal critique that we need to listen to is about the confrontation. And I think that really, really good debate advances the practice, advances the discipline, but conflict does not. And one of the things I always say is we need to differentiate rather than divide. And one of the things, and I thank you all for the platform here. I mean, I think one of the key purposes of my being on the show is to differentiate between essentially wellness spas and wellness products, and products that are putting, or equipment, I should say, that's really putting the research in, getting the FDA stamp of approval or the Canadian equivalency, or doing their darnest to get there. We need to differentiate. There's a place for everybody, as long as we clearly state who and what we are, what we're doing, and what we're doing it with.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of conversations regarding organizing ourselves, and we're still working on it. It's almost like I had the same conversation last year, this year. So I'm tired of complaining. I got to do something, John. So I'm going to try to get everybody together, herd the cats, and see if we can.
Well, to that point, Mari and Jay, you were both there. Because I've been to conferences where you're right, it's a lot of friction, a lot of mine's better than yours kind of conversations. Yeah. To what do you attribute, Jay and Mari, or Pete for that matter, this particular conference? What's different about it that promoted that sense of commonality, of purpose?
I'd say confidence. Right.
Okay.
I think Yeah, I don't want to get too psychology here, but I think confidence.
Well, you're the best one.
Yeah, but you have to be really careful about
Of
analyzing your colleagues, blah blah blah. There's the ego. Ego is dangerous. Confidence is not. So if we can kick out the ego, bring in the confidence, and the willingness and the desire to share. Right.
I didn't pick up on any of that at the conference. Kind of what the discussion that we had was, it just so happened that Dr. Thatcher put a post up on LinkedIn regarding imedisync. And, iMedisync's trying to break some ground and, help grow the pie. And I don't know if Dr. Thatcher was being defensive or nitpicking or whatever, but from a layman, which is me, I'm looking at him like, I'm confused. I don't know. Is Thatcher right? Is imedisync right? And that doesn't help.
Thank you. See, this is the problem. We're creating confusion as opposed to question. Okay. And I want to hear questions, because questions beget answers. Confusion begets, I would say, ego sword fights, right? I mean, one of the things everybody here knows, it's no secret, I am pro clinical database, but I very, very much see the place for normative. I am not anti-normative. I just find in my practice, in the budget that clients have, your standard client, not your super wealthy client. Clinical takes me all the way and takes the client all the way, but I am anything but anti-normative. Okay, I would love to see treatment that is based upon normative databases and equipment that can come down a little bit in cost. Right. I'm digressing. Apologies. But all I'm saying is we've got to get rid of the conflict and get into the questioning. Right. And there's nothing wrong with pointed questioning. Yeah. I mean, you've witnessed me do it here. It's like, Yeah.
Well, I have to say, if I think brain is doing it so wrong, why are Montreal Neurological, which is it's one of the prime neurological research facilities in the world, and they were there with Rasmussen and Penfield at the very beginning, where they set up the 10-20 system and everything. I mean, the brain surgeries where they stimulated the brain to find out what was present where, in the brain. I mean, really major facility. And Harvard, at Harvard Medical, they're doing research with them. They've got in Korea, their development of their discriminant between dementia and mild cognitive impairment was developed in major government hospitals, and this isn't a small N. They split the population and validated their studies on independent sample populations, so that they're doing the science and doing it right. And sniping at them is not terribly productive. And quite honestly, their techniques are derived from Schwartz computational neuroscience's best cognitive neuroscience, the neuroinformatics group, basically. So, EEG doesn't have a ground truth. If you stick a triangle in an MRI, you get a triangle out. In an EEG, if you change the filters, you change the montage. So there's always arguments. It's inherent that we're going to have arguments, but they shouldn't be nasty competitive. They should be trying to drill down on a scientific point. And I don't think that was what was happening. So,
well, factor in there's money at stake in all of these conversations, and that pollutes the conversation. I'm sitting here listening to what you're saying, Jay and Maury and Pete. I think you resonate with hopefully what I'm about to say. The mom who just tuned in, What is she thinking about this conversation? And conversely, it feels like neurotherapy, neurofeedback, quantitative electroencephalography is being held in an odd way, to, in my view, to a different level of scrutiny than anything else. You wouldn't ask your psychotherapist, well, why are you picking DBT over some other form of therapy for me? You wouldn't ask the question. You would have the faith that your therapist knows your cognitive space well enough to understand how to get the truth for you. So your physician, on how they analyze your blood sample.
Yeah,
You're not going to ask them the question about what lab did you send it to, or who's doing the titration analysis, blah blah blah. You're not even going to ask those questions. Why are we asked those questions?
Thank you so much for bringing that up, John. And I think there are 2 points to this. I want to start with something positive. And with apologies to Martijn and Dirk, I don't remember which of our 2 presenters mentioned this, but they did mention in terms of how pharmaceutical companies are grossly de-investing in the production of a lot of medications for standard anxiety, depression, etc., because they're seeing, excuse me, that there's not enough money in it anymore. Okay, right. So that is actually something really positive, because I think the biggest cog in our wheel was the whole notion of the double blind, okay, which when you are training biology, you can't trick biology. It's the whole purpose. We're training. Anyways, I'm not going to go down that path unless people really want me to.
Well, no. I just for a moment, I wish you would, because again, mom and dad is listening, for their child, and they don't understand what you're talking. Perhaps don't understand what you're talking about.
So, to all the parents out there, the whole concept of working with the EEG is training functional biology. Okay, and if you are successful in training functional biology, you are at some level aware of it. So what we're playing with is that awareness. And if you try and do a double-blind study, you're essentially defeating the whole purpose of the training, okay? Because you're trying to trick. So that's where we go into the notion of you have to train something. And I talk about in pharmaceutical double blinds, the concept they're talking about training the concept of nothing. And when we're working with functional biology, we always have to be training something. So it's something versus the actual EEG, the actual alpha wave or the theta wave or the beta wave or what have you. And that was one of my issues. I think, I don't know, Jay, whether you want, sorry, Pete, you want to put up my paper again, but that's one of the things I talk about in the studies that supposedly fail. They don't fail. What they're saying is that the placebo is equal to. It's not placebo, because right. Placebo is a belief or nothing. Okay? Actually training EMG or movement. Okay, movement is a dependent variable and a lot of ADHD. Okay, and in other conditions, it can be an independent variable. Okay, so this whole concept of the pharmaceutical double blind is absolutely invalid. Yep. Now, one of the things I have, I'm going a bit against my word in terms of I really criticize my colleagues who criticize the pharmaceutical model without understanding it, though. Okay, so I think that's the key one, that we all have to know why we're against the pharmaceutical model, and that loops into the money. Okay, I think one of the reasons why MediSync is challenging is because they have major money behind them. I think there's a fear there in terms of the little moms and pops. My clinic is a little moms and pops. I mean, we can say we're a boutique. Yeah, we're a boutique, but we're small, right? And there are a lot of, are we going to be taken over by big corporations again and lose that footing? And of course, the larger conversations, what happens when there's big money involved. So
one of the things that Martijn's talk showed is that if you use biomarkers to assist in your clinical decision making, that you can actually select medication much more efficaciously. And he has large studies, thousands of people in his studies, and his thesis is again going into publication. A lot of the pieces of it have already been published, and essentially the drug companies can use a biomarker to target a product. Let's say today, Mari, you and I whipped up a batch of drugs in the tub, like the old bathtub gin, and we stirred it up, and when we were done, this would fix 20% of the autism kids absolutely 100% fine. Well, this is a fabulous drug. But how could we show it was any good at all, since 80% of the people wouldn't respond to it? But if we can look at their brain and say, oh, this one's got that little funny wiggle, it'll respond to this, we now have a drug targeting mechanism that we can now show the 100% efficacy, and now we sell the drug to, I don't know, what's the market of autistic, 20% of the autism population would be a gigantic chunk.
Yeah.
So the biomarker approach was seen as a strategic asset. If you had a phenotype or a biomarker knowledge, you could develop drugs that were targeting neuropsychiatric conditions and actually show efficacy. So,
in full transparency, Jay, the first time, I forget the gentleman's name. I know it was in Italy. It was either Venice or it was one of the Italian meetings. And I believe he was a psychiatrist, and he was the first one who talked about using EEG to prescribe. And I don't mind sharing, at that point, my heart stopped. I felt extremely threatened. It's like, oh no, we're just going to become a tool of the pharmaceutical company. I've since relaxed. And I think, I want to support it, but I think there's going to be another bifurcation here. Okay. So there are going to be individuals who definitely use this integrated with pharmaceutical, take away that idiotic trial and error, which for whatever reason is accepted in no other. Let's put on a pair of shoes that's too small and see if your foot will adjust. No, but so I think a lot of individuals are going to have a choice to make, whether they want to really work with functional biology, okay, and train in a semi-permanent way the changes that they want in terms of anxiety reduction, attention augmentation, etc., or whether they want to blend with the pharmaceutical and try and get this purely through the chemical channels. And that's fair. That's a choice. I mean, I know what side I very, very firmly stand on, but that's potentially, informed choice is good choice.
Neurons can be controlled by a ligand-gated ion channel, which is a pharmaceutical lock and key to that ion channel, or a voltage-gated ion channel. And that you can also use both. And, I depend on a day-to-day basis on medication to stay alive. It's not better living through chemistry. I'm just plain living through chemistry. This is, heavy duty steroids and stuff. So I have nothing against meds. And in some clinical cases, I strongly suggest that the combination of both of them to start with, and then the medication titrated down once we get the system under control. And in epilepsy, as an example, as soon as you stop the discharges from happening, the network that supports the discharge starts to disassemble. And that's what we're looking for, is the network disassembling. Epilepsy is not a problem of a focus, it's a problem of a network. So you can't really effectively cut out a focus without damaging the brain, first of all. And secondarily, the likelihood of you taking care of the entire network with one hub. The success rate of brain surgery for epilepsy is, well, if you're really that desperate, 50% success rate sounds okay. But if you're going to cut off a part of my temporal lobe and I only have a half a chance, and in your judgment of success, if my seizures go down by half, that's success. Well, instead of 200 a day, I'm having 100 a day. Right. Big freaking deal. I'm still unable to do anything. Right. So they're and they don't count partial seizures. In my work with epilepsy, I consider success seizure-free, totally, medication-free, totally. That's success, and we have success. So I'm happy to stack our work up against traditional neuroscience work any day. Our outcomes, I think, are superior, not inferior. And all we need is an open-minded skeptic, which is the scientific method.
Yeah.
You create a null hypothesis. How skeptical is that?
Jay Marie, when I was working the crowd, having a SUDS, one of the things that came up was TMS, and they haven't gone through the type of, I don't want to say scrutiny or going through the weeds of what the neurofeedback practitioners are going through, the infighting, because everybody should make a buck. And what came up was the cost of the equipment, because Murray, you were there hearing that. What was your take? Because what I was hearing, again, as I was, observing with my on-air sign walking around the crowd, was that the barrier to entry for neurofeedback and the amplifiers, the cost is lower, so it's easier to get into. You have more people.
Careful.
Careful what?
When we get into the discussion, well,
I'm just telling you
what I was potentially hearing.
Allegedly, you want to say allegedly?
What I was allegedly hearing. And this is where some bells started to go off, is that people are choosing their own equipment based on affordability, which implies that you're using lesser equipment, and that is something that I will get my sword out about. Okay, in terms of more expensive is definitely not necessarily better, but there are some treatments currently that are only available with very expensive models. Okay, but I think we want to be really, really careful here about getting in camps and deprecating individuals saying they're choosing method B because they don't have the money and B is inferior. That's not the case.
So
that's not what I heard.
TMS devices range in price from the Neurostar, about $250,000, and then you have a per use fee that can mount up to thousands of dollars a month if you have a busy clinic. Brainsway, another multiple $100,000 device. There's Magstim, Magventure. They'll say that it's down in the 80, but by the time you get what you need, you're a little over $100,000, and those are the less expensive devices. I was on the planning committee for the TMS Society for 5 years. I've got a fairly good insight into what's going on there. Imagine that they don't do EEG to guide them. They may do an MRI or a functional MRI to find a spot in the brain that they're going to stimulate. And luckily for them, Martijn Arns found a spot that when it's the right spot, you get a cardiac deceleration. So there's a biobehavioral marker other than just making you wiggle your fingers if they find your motor strip. Traditionally, they found the motor strip and they measured forward 5 centimeters. Well, sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it wasn't enough. Big head, small head, Harvard, the third year of the Clinical TMS Society, discovered that the size of the head mattered. Ooh, and you should do proportional measurements like EEG has done since the beginning. My apologies. My assistant is at the front door barking, and we've got a chimney cleaner person coming today. So
it's just our co-host.
He's otherwise involved hassling the chimney guy. But the TMS world does not do EEG guidance at all, and they assume if you have depression, that's a DSM characterization, that they're going to point it left frontally and stimulate at 10 hertz or faster. Well, some people don't have that pattern. Martijn Arns showed in 3,000 something patients overall in depression, it isn't left frontal alpha. There's a subset of women that have frontal asymmetry, but across the general population, it's not the case. So, they point it here, and they have about 40% success. Now, what kind of success is that?
Measured by patient response?
Yeah. 40% remission. You get higher rates of response, but there's no remission. You get change during treatment, but afterwards it doesn't work. And it's a treatment, and like a chiropractic treatment, you probably have to go back and be touched up on rare occasion. It doesn't last. Anyway, there's lots of different types of stimulation. You can stimulate at different frequencies to inhibit or excite. They have what's called a theta burst stimulation, which has very fast stimulation done in a pattern of 6 of them in a second, trying to mimic or match somewhat the brain's function frontally. There's a theta with gamma nested in it. I mean, they're trying to match the brain's function a bit, and so the TMS is still a treatment. You end up with no skill. You end up with an effect. Right. And neurofeedback is a training, and you end up with a skill. Yeah. And you walk away with the skill that you have. It can't the treatment. Oh man, I had this fabulous massage. My shoulder feels so good. Well, I'm gonna tweak that shoulder again because I
want to
tore the rotator cuff, and but if you actually have a fix with neurofeedback, you don't end up having to go back again and again and again for having your brain zapped another few times.
I really want to hound home that point. Jay, you're so brilliant. You move points very quickly, but I really want to highlight that it's a no skill effect versus training the brain, so you can essentially remind the brain, hey, that's the way I did it. So I mean, let's all be transparent, people do come back for tune-ups, okay, versus needing the full disruption of the pattern, because that same pattern can recreate itself or reconstruct itself, versus with straightforward neuro working with EEG, you're training a new pattern, and sometimes the brain needs reminding or reinforcing of that pattern.
Well, this is something I mentioned, I think, in my email about quick fixes. Culturally, we want a quick fix. So we go to our doctor. We say, I'm a 38-year-old woman. I got 2 kids. I got postpartum depression. What can you do for me? The doctor goes, TMS, because we've got this machine and we can hook you up, and in a couple of sessions you're going to feel a lot better. True. And point is, to your point, both of yours, what we're in the business of is, I use the metaphor of the fish. You can give a man a fish, or you can teach the man how to fish. We're in the business of teaching people how to fish. That's the difference. We're not just giving them a short-term solution that feeds them for a day. We're giving them a lifetime solution that allows them to conduct their lives appropriately. So that skill component is so on target, and it's what people need to know. But what do we say to the postpartum depressed mom who's listening right now? Can she spend 3 months with us learning how to get her brain to conduct itself in a hopefully depression-free state? That's clearly what we offer. And how do we tell her that other solution, that medication is going to make you feel good? for a few weeks, whatever, got some side effects, but yes, they work. But the end goal, and that's where I wanted to circle back to the pharmaceutical recommendations based on EEG. That's like a bridge, guys. I know you know
I
this.
love it. I love it. I love
Yeah,
it. John.
you all know this, but folks listening, that's a bridge comment in my view.
Yeah.
We can help you help your psychiatrist determine right today what's the best SSRI for this particular person. And then you can take your SSRI, get out of the ditch that you drove yourself into, and get the training to not have you go back in the ditch anymore, and thereby get rid of the drug that you have to take for some period of time so that you don't become suicidal or whatever.
Yeah.
Those drastic.
I really want to ride that pony.
Yes.
And one of the things that came up that I was so happy about at the summit was we started to talk about sex. Okay. I really want to be careful about gender and identity. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about differentiation based on sex. So probably chromosomes at this point. But in terms of, I would say not maltreatment is a really difficult word or a strong accusation, but in terms of inattention to females, biological females, in terms of the risk factor. And here I am putting my judgment hat on in terms of the medications that females are automatically put on at certain, again, I don't want to overuse crisis, but they can be crisis, like postpartum. Some females in perimenopause, there's another big hormonal change in surge, and they get on meds and never freaking get off. And they one of the side effects might be gone, okay, but then there are these whole other slew of things that females, biological females, are dealing with. So yes, there is a purpose to the bridging. I get it. I'm not anti-pharma, but in terms of EEG and the ability now, first of all, we can differentiate, and that I really thank our speakers for going there and saying this is the case with biological females. We're actually studying this to be able to help to disrupted cycles and really help people along the natural progression of birthing, of motherhood, of perimenopause, menopause, etc., without making being female an illness that needs to be medicated.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the major changes that the Korean database has brought. They did the 10 years of data collection to collect separate male and female databases and show the difference. And the HBI database in Europe collected a lot more data so that they could split theirs male and female. Because you can't, if you have 1,000 people in a database and that characterizes each of the age ranges, you can't cut that in half and have a 500-person database. It doesn't have enough people in each of the age ranges. So you've got to collect more. You can't just chop a database in half and call the male and female separate and have that as your norms. That's just not, you don't have enough power at that point. So the ability now to have male-female differences identified ends up being a big deal. And we know that the females over 45 have a lot more gamma and high beta than males. Males go kind of electrocerebral silent in the same age range. And to have such a dichotomy, and if you combine them, what do you have? The males don't want to be compared to a bunch of beta and gamma that they don't really have. They're going to be insufficient. And the females don't want to end up being called excessive. You want to compare to, we have a unique database. If you combine them, what kind of database is that? Right. So modern research has to have male and female done. You can't do a study on something with just men now. The NIH won't fund a a study that doesn't account for sex.
Jay, can I put you on the spot? If you got a database out there,
like, do I have a freaking choice?
You always got a choice.
You love it, Jay. You love it.
So this bickering that's going around, if you have a database that doesn't separate male and female, is that an inferior database?
Well, it doesn't match modern standards. I'll say that. And let's say you're an NIH researcher and you want to do research, and you're going to have male and female studied. And if you've got a database that doesn't have them differentiated, how can you use it?
I'm just going to put this in the positive.
It's an archaic term, tool.
Yeah, it's about bloody time. The whole notion the unisex clothing never fits women. Women end up wearing male clothing and we call it unisex, right? So I think it's the same type of thing, in terms of definitely pharmaceutical. But I'd say the positive in terms of our archaic system is that at least it's a blend. So I think we were far ahead of the pharmaceutical companies and the pharmaceutical research. But what I really love is we're evolving faster. And I would say those of us with non-sex discriminant, again, I'm not talking gender for anybody who's getting freaky here. I'm talking about sex. We have to catch up, and we are catching up. So yeah, let's just, instead of the fighting, it's just, okay, let's update our databases.
Yeah.
How do you update it, Jay?
And you also have to realize that there are people investigating gender with these sex differentiated databases, which assist.
It's fun. Yeah.
So it's and the Koreans were very helpful in the first study of that, because they had the only database that could have been helpful on that topic. And so there's data being generated, and so we won't have to worry about the term sex being misinterpreted for gender or vice versa in some fashion.
Well, I have to, because it's so political now, and we have to take away the politics, right?
Yeah. But the databases are starting to address gender as well as sex. So
Jay, hold on. All these normative.
It's all about data, So
okay, all these normative databases that are out there that haven't said male, female, are there identifiers available to go back to the database and correct it, or do you have to do all new scans to put in there?
Well, you'd end up having to expand the database numbers. Let's say between age 15 and 25, you've got 70 people. Well, if you break that down to only 30 people, and 30 in one group, 40 in another, there aren't really enough to characterize that age range anymore. So you've got to add to the database norms in order to populate it with enough males and females across each of the age ranges for you to end up characterizing. To characterize a group, you can't really characterize a group in less than 20, 30 people. So if you split male and female and there's only 10 female in an age range, you're really not characterizing them adequotely.
And the other thing is, those of us that have been in practice for many, many years, our experience is telling us. Okay. So yeah, we're working with normative and clinical databases that are not sex discriminate, but we're using our clinical knowledge. So I don't want to bash people who are using those databases, who have experience and are interjecting it, but for any newbie and for anybody who's still building on a database or constructing a database, the message is out. We have to separate and differentiate.
And the frequency range the database covers is something that should be looked at as well. Right. I mean, stopping at 25 hertz, as where John did, or 30 as Thatcher has, eliminates the ability to get norms at 40 hertz. Yeah. And at this point, there are amps that have been databases collected on that go to 150 hertz. So gamma 2 at 80 to 100 could be looked at. Ripples at 120, 150 could be looked at. And those are important for cognitive function and consciousness. So, you know, if you're going to bother doing a database, at least have a modern amplifier instead of something from the 70s. You know, a 56 Chevy was a perfectly good car, but you know, if you had one that was new driving it coast to coast, you'd end up having to do some wrenching between the West Coast and the East Coast because that's the engineering. And you can buy a modern car and drive it coast to coast without any real difficulties at this point.
I mean, we're not trying to bash, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
The people that, is there an argument that if you have a database that you built up and you've been using, is there an argument to say that it doesn't matter if it's male or female? Is that what somebody would be saying?
We know it matters. So
no, I know, but would this person?
It doesn't matter what somebody says. It matters, you know.
So now you need clinical knowledge to supplement. Okay, because I'm going to go back and say, like, the pharmaceutical claims unisex when it's really all male. The EEG community claims unisex, and it's a merge. It doesn't quite fit the male and it doesn't quite fit the female, but each clinician is essentially, if we use the seamstress model, each, you know, we tailor from the unisex shift that we have. That's the analogy I'm going to run with. But you need clinical knowledge now to differentiate and to assist your client. And I would say I'm overjoyed, first of all, now that we're aware of this. We're completely bashing the pharmaceutical one because that's just wrong. It's biased, it's sexist. I could go on and on and on. And we were just a little bit too fluidity neutral. Okay. New generation, here I go. But the new generation of equipment producers, the new generation of practitioners are on this, and I'm really, really grateful. And I think those of us who have been doing this for a while are going to just slowly slide in as the equipment and the money to purchase it becomes available. But Jay, I don't know whether you agree. Please disagree, John, as well. I'd say those of us who have been dancing in the dendrites, I'm taking that from
David,
yeah. You know, we're aware of this, right? And we've been doing sex-based fitting of our treatments.
John,
there's also another element. I'm just to add on to what Mari was saying about sexism. There's also ageism.
Yeah.
You go to the, ask your pharmaceutical rep how many studies they've done on the drug that you're about to give your 12-year-old.
Yeah.
You're going to be shocked at the scarcity.
Yeah.
These are drugs designed around adults that are just assuming children are small versions of adults. It's
facility. This was being cheap. This was because they were on the university campuses and they didn't have to pay male university students much to get the info. Okay,
right.
They cheaped out.
Right. Yeah. And just again, for the casual listener, this conversation, I think, points to how forward-thinking and rigorous this particular field is compared to, I can't think of anybody else, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Nuclear physics. I mean, I'm not sure who's
for the mom and pops. Then I'll just clarify what I said out there. Majority of pharmaceutical studies they recruit participants from universities, and they eliminate, or in the past they eliminated females because they didn't want to deal with the monthly cycle and how that might affect the meds. So essentially, most pharmaceuticals that are currently on the market have been tested almost exclusively as an excluding everybody else. Yep. On males from 18 to 25.
Yep.
John, here's where I was going with it, and I'm not trying to confuse anybody. I'm not trying to bash anybody. What I'm hearing is you have
What
people,
answer do you want, Pete? Just tell us the answer.
no,
We'll tell
but you have these, look, you don't need, look, you talk clinically speaking, you don't need a degree to do this. There's people that don't have degrees out there. There's people out there that are going to people that don't have degrees that do this. And what I'm hearing is if you're
I'm going to interrupt. There's Jay.
This is actually predicting medications based on the EEG phenotypes and biomarkers. And this is one I published in 2014. Martijn has advanced the use of EEG to predict medication. Everybody thinks an SSRI is an SSRI is an SSRI, but if you have a slow focus or epileptiform discharge in your EEG, there's only one SSRI that still has efficacy, and that's Zoloft, which has a bit of a different chemical twist to it with dopamine, not just serotonin. So the specificity of what to give is out there, and I would suggest that it's an important thing to look at the EEG. As if you're a cardiologist and people came to you complaining of chest pain and you sent them all for angioplasty, half of them had indigestion. Right. So, you can't base the symptom, you can't base your treatment on the symptom. The symptom should tell you what to test. The test should guide your treatment.
Right.
And what we have for guiding treatments of psychological and psychiatric is the EEG and ERP. Those tests give insight into brain function that help guide the choices. And goodness knows it's just a freaking crapshoot based on behavior. Yeah. And the DSM agreed that they weren't valid. There's no predictive validity. And what we're using is the EEG to get our predictive validity. And this paper, I think, is just one of them, but I would urge you to actually look to the literature. You'll find that the EEG is fairly efficient at differentiating between different drug classes for treatment. Anyway.
Yeah. This should be standard issue in every psychiatric office, and every person seeking psychiatric or psychological care should know about this. Yeah. This is
the reason I did it is because I got to put this headline in. Grandma was right. So she said, "Don't dive into the water unless you know what's under the surface."
Exactly. And again, for people who don't know, that Jay's work here, this is, what you said, 2014. You're resting that you reached back into history with Suffin and Emery, who did work on this in the 90s. This is not a new concept for people who deal in EEG, that we understand the connection between EEG performance and medications. This is common knowledge. The fact that your psychiatrist doesn't know about it, that's on them.
Yeah.
The difficulty with the Suffin and Emery model is that you have to be medication free,
right,
in order to do the testing. And let's say you've been treated with an SSRI. It could sometimes be a month to 3 months to have it washed out so you can get a clean EEG. Yeah. And you're hanging there with no treatment for a month to 3 months, 90 days.
Feeling horrible.
We work stochastically, right? We take people in the state that they arrive in, discuss with them where they want to go and how they want to get there.
Last question to the state. Here's a statement, and just respond, Pete, yes or no. If you're training against a normative database that doesn't include age and gender, it's not as efficient as training against one that does do that. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. I can see why people are upset.
Yeah.
Pete said that, nobody else.
But it's an evolution. Let's hop on the evolution train.
Yeah.
But if you know your stuff.
Yeah, send all legal inquiries to Pete.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that I don't have an appreciation of a 1956 Chevy. I mean, they're still a fabulous car for what they were in their era. But just don't use them on the track nowadays.
To run
You
with
know?
the analogy, though, they are putting electrical motors in these really nice old cars, right? So
I'm looking into that. That's funny you bring that up. I have a 64 Mustang and I'm considering going electric with it.
there you go. Yeah, there you go.
Making it a full electric car. I think it'd be hilarious to see this old classic Mustang and then open up the hood and go, what?
Can I make a fun comment to round out here?
Please.
I'm gonna suggest a fun challenge, Jay, with bowing to Cynthia saying you shouldn't grow your beard. Might I suggest you collect from the grow it versus shave it, and depending on how much money you collect to not grow it versus to grow it, you could have an ongoing little.
Well,
we could have your beard.
let's put it this way: the $4,265 that were donated in total to shave it included $2,000 I put down to start with to keep it.
Yeah. Okay.
So
that I remember.
They raised
how it got that high. Yeah.
They matched that in the entire group, which was not that hard, and
$30
beat it by $625, which is they got more than I did. My money stayed in, and their money on top of it. That's how we got. And there are two $2,000 awards for students, and the organization does not have an income model. Everything is basically a wash. We provide good food in the breaks. We put on a really nice prime rib dinner, had good wine. I planned a 3-day birthday party basically, and had neuroscience at the same time, which has always been my model. Good times and good science brings people in, and it was a good birthday for 74. Next year's 75. Goodness knows what we'll do.
I told you it's 64.
So, cheers.
That's right.
John Mekrut, The Balanced Brain. Dr. Maurice Swingle, author of iMinds. Jay Gunkelman, the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans and has no beard. Thank you for another
It's on the way back. It's on the way back.
Exciting episode of the Neuronoodle Network podcast. Take care, all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
It's been fun. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
The Neuronoodle podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.